My wife and I reached the hotel, and while I was finishing the check-in at the counter, she stepped aside to answer a phone call. Just as I was about to collect the keys, an older administrator came up to me and asked, "Is that your wife?" I said yes, and then he quietly told me, "Follow me. You need to see this." The moment the older administrator leaned closer and whispered, "You need to see this," something inside my chest tightened. My wife was still a few steps away in the hotel lobby, her back turned to me, speaking softly on the phone near a tall glass window. From where I stood at the check-in counter, she looked completely normal, calm, composed, even smiling slightly as she spoke, but the administrator's expression told a different story. I'd just finished checking us into the hotel. Our room keys rested on the polished marble counter between us. Everything about the moment should have felt ordinary, another quiet trip, another routine check-in. Instead, the man motioned for me to follow him. "Is that your wife?" he asked again, his voice low. "Yes," I replied, confused. He glanced once more toward her, then turned back to me. "You should come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." The way he said it made my stomach drop. As I followed him down a narrow hallway behind the reception desk, I could still see my wife through the lobby glass, laughing softly into her phone. I didn't know it yet, but within the next few minutes, everything I believed about my marriage was about to collapse. I'm not the kind of man people usually notice first. I've always been the quiet one in the room, the one who listens more than he talks, the one who solves problems without needing applause. For most of my life, that suited me just fine. My name isn't important. What matters is that for 8 years, I believed I had built something steady with my wife. While other couples around us fought loudly or drifted apart, we seemed calm on the surface. At least, that's what everyone thought. I worked long hours running my small logistics company, often leaving before sunrise and coming home after dark. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept our life comfortable. Vacations, dinners, a nice apartment. Those things mattered to her, so I made sure we had them. Over time, though, I started noticing small things. Dismissive comments when I spoke, the way she would roll her eyes when I suggested plans, little jokes about how boring I was compared to her friends' husbands. I never reacted. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume the quiet person in the room isn't paying attention. But I always pay attention. And that night, standing in the hallway, behind the hotel lobby, while an old administrator led me toward a security room, I had a strange feeling building in my chest. The kind of feeling you get right before the truth finally decides to reveal itself. As I walked behind the administrator, a series of quiet moments from the past year began replaying in my mind. Small things I had ignored at the time. My wife had started taking more private phone calls, not secretive exactly, but separate. She would step into another room, lower her voice, and come back smiling as if nothing had happened. At dinners with friends, she had a way of turning my calm personality into a joke. "Oh, don't ask him," she once laughed while stirring her drink. "He'd rather stay home organizing spreadsheets." Everyone chuckled politely. I smiled too. It seemed easier that way. There were also the subtle glances, the kind you only notice if you're watching carefully. Once, at a party, I caught her exchanging a quick look with a man across the room. It lasted only a second, barely anything, but the way she immediately picked up her phone afterward felt rehearsed. When I asked about it later, she brushed it off. "You're imagining things," she said with a light shrug. "You always overthink." Maybe she was right. I told myself I was being paranoid, but over time, those little moments started stacking up like quiet warning signs. And now, as the administrator opened the door to a dim security room and gestured toward a glowing monitor inside, I realized something unsettling. Maybe I hadn't been overthinking at all. The security room smelled faintly of dust and old electronics. A wall of monitors flickered in the dim light, each screen showing a different corner of the hotel. The administrator closed the door, quietly behind us, and motioned for me to stand beside him. Without saying much, he tapped a key and rewound one of the recordings. The screen showed the lobby just minutes earlier. I saw myself at the counter, filling out the check-in form. Then the camera angle shifted slightly. My wife stepped away from me, phone pressed to her ear. But she wasn't talking the way she had looked from afar. Her voice was low, urgent. She glanced toward me once to make sure I wasn't listening, then turned her back. A moment later, another man walked into the frame near the entrance. He didn't approach her directly, but he slowed down, just enough. They exchanged a quick look. Not the kind strangers share. The administrator paused the video and zoomed in slightly. My wife's expression softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. The man gave a small nod before continuing toward the elevators. The administrator looked at me carefully. "He's already checked in," he said quietly. For a few seconds I didn't react. Then something inside me settled. calm, clear, almost cold. At that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and whatever happened next, I would handle it my way. For a moment, I simply watched the paused frame on the monitor. My wife's face was frozen in that small, familiar smile, the one she hadn't shown me in a long time. Strangely, I didn't feel anger, not yet. What I felt was clarity. I turned to the administrator and asked a few calm questions. The man in the video had checked in earlier that evening. Different room, same floor? The administrator hadn't come to me out of curiosity. He'd noticed the pattern before. The brief eye contact, the timing of the call, the way she positioned herself in the lobby. It wasn't his first time seeing something like this. I thanked him quietly and asked for a copy of the footage. Hotels keep records for security reasons. And after a moment's hesitation, he agreed. Not out of sympathy, I think, but out of simple professionalism. While the file transferred, I stood there thinking. For years, I had handled contracts worth millions in my logistics business. Negotiations, disputes, broken agreements. It was part of my everyday life. The rule was always the same. Never react emotionally, and never move without evidence. This situation wasn't so different. By the time the administrator handed me the file on a small flash drive, the outline of a plan had already formed in my mind. Not loud, not messy, just precise. I returned to the lobby as if nothing had happened. My wife was finishing her call, leaning against the window. Her expression relaxed when she saw me. "Everything done?" she asked. I nodded and handed her one of the room keys. "Room's ready." We walked to the elevator together. The ride up was quiet except for the soft hum of the cables. She scrolled through her phone while I watched the floor numbers climb. Same floor as the man from the video. When we stepped out, I noticed the room numbers immediately. Years of logistics work had trained my mind to observe details quickly. His room was halfway down the hall. Ours was near the end. Inside our room, she set her bag down and said casually, "I might go grab a drink at the bar later." I simply nodded, "Sure." About 20 minutes later, she said she needed some fresh air and stepped out. I waited a few seconds before opening the laptop I'd brought for work. The flash drive slid into the port, and the video began uploading to a secure cloud folder along with a few scheduled emails. Then I quietly walked down the hallway. From a distance, I saw her knock on the other man's door. The door opened, and at that exact moment, the hotel's night manager, along with 2 security staff I had calmly spoken to minutes earlier, turned the corner behind me. No shouting, just the sound of a door slowly opening to the truth. For a second, nobody spoke. My wife froze in the doorway, her hand still resting against it. The man inside looked just as stunned. The hallway lights cast a pale glow across their faces, and the silence felt heavier than any argument ever could. The night manager stepped forward first. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we need to discuss a complaint regarding guest conduct." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but the meaning was clear. My wife slowly turned and saw me standing at the end of the hallway. The color drained from her face as realization settled in. Not panic, something deeper. The understanding that the situation was no longer under her control. "Wait, this isn't," she started, but the words didn't finish themselves, because there wasn't much left to explain. The manager asked them both to step into the hallway while security handled the room situation. Hotel policies are strict about undisclosed visitors and disturbances, quiet procedures, documented reports, everything handled professionally. I didn't raise my voice. I simply watched. In that moment, I realized something strange. The pain I had expected wasn't overwhelming. What I felt instead was distance, like watching the end of a story I had already finished reading. And for the first time in a long while, I understood something clearly. Respect, once broken quietly, rarely returns the same way. Later that night, I sat alone by the hotel window, watching the city lights stretch across the dark streets below. The room felt different now, quieter, almost peaceful. My wife had left the hotel after a long, tense conversation with the manager and security. She tried speaking to me once in the hallway, her voice shaking, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. I listened without interrupting. Then I simply told her we would talk about the rest later. Not tonight. Years ago, I might have reacted differently. Anger, shouting, accusations. Those things feel powerful in the moment, but they rarely solve anything. What I had learned from business and from life was that clarity matters more than noise. The evidence was already stored safely. The truth was no longer something that could be denied or twisted. In the weeks ahead, there would be lawyers, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Ending 8 years of marriage wouldn't be simple, but strangely, I didn't feel broken. Some betrayals destroy you, others reveal exactly where you need to stand. As I looked out at the quiet city, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. The person who lost something that night wasn't me.